In this video, you're going to learn how to put together a podcast intro and outro that stands out from the crowd. You'll learn how to script an intro that keeps your listeners listening and an outro that gets them to take that next step. I'll show you how to find quality, royalty-free music, and you'll learn how to put it all together. So let's talk about writing the script for your intro and outro. So what should an intro and outro do and say exactly? So the reason why we have a podcast intro is to let your listeners or your potential listeners know that they're in the right place, basically, and know that this is the podcast that's right for them and that they should keep listening. In terms of how that shows up, it's normally going to be up to 30 seconds or so of dialogue read by the host of the podcast or by a professional voiceover artist, and then that's going to be placed over some kind of music to set the tone. And then the purpose of your outro is to thank people for listening, to let them know that there's going to be another episode and that they should subscribe so that they don't miss it, basically. You might choose another call to action other than subscribe, such as please share this episode with your friends, or you might have a call to action to send them to a website to download something. And we're going to talk about call to actions as we script this. But firstly, your intro. Now, the trap that a lot of podcasters fall into is that they feel like they need to put a lot of information in the intro. That your listener needs to know your name, your backstory, why you started the podcast, what questions you're answering, and all of that. And really, this kind of thing puts off new listeners. Your existing listeners, hopefully they'll stick around, but they don't want to sit through a really long intro as well. And your brand new listeners, they just want to know quickly if this podcast is going to bring them the value that they're looking for. So the three key elements of scripting your podcast intro are, firstly, that it's short. We're talking 20 to 30 seconds max. You can even get away with a little bit shorter than that. Secondly, it's obviously going to include the name of the podcast. And thirdly, it needs to tell potential subscribers why they should listen to your podcast, why they're in the right place, the key question or the key focus that you're going to be answering on your podcast. And as for your outro, a lot of listeners won't end up hearing the outro because they'll have stopped at a certain point, or they'll just turn it off as soon as the outro comes in. But for those who stick around, you want to ideally thank them for listening, tell them where they can get that next episode, and also add your call to action. So let's take a look at the script that I've written for my podcast, Podcasting Amplified, for the intro and outro, and this will help you to script your own. So we've got the script here for my intro and outro. I'm just going to read the intro quickly. So it goes, you're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to help you to leverage the power of podcasting to amplify your message and achieve your goals. If you're a podcaster and you want to learn from the journeys of other passionate podcasters, you're in the right place. So it's short, it keeps it under 30 seconds. It's got the name of the podcast, obviously, and it tells you what the podcast is about. So it's about leveraging the power of podcasting, and then it also has the benefit or the outcome that the listener will get from it if they listen. And this helps to convert people into listeners much better than just saying sort of what your podcast is. So if you had a nutrition podcast or something, so this is the nutrition podcast where each week we share nutritious recipes or whatever, that's fine, and it will help the listener know that they're in the right place. But if you can add the benefit onto the end of that in a kind of so that format, so that you can become the best version of yourself, for example, that is much more powerful at persuading people to listen if they know what benefit that they're going to get out of it. And then I've just got a little end bit. If you're a podcaster and want to learn from the journeys of other passionate podcasters, so just if you're a podcaster, just to communicate that they're the right person to listen to the podcast. And also it kind of hints that it's an interview podcast because learn from the journeys of other passionate podcasters, so they know what kind of style of podcast it is. And then you're in the right place just reinforces that. You don't have to literally say that. I just felt that it worked for my intro. Now, this is as long as I'd want an intro. I don't think you'd need to go any more than this. 2 sentences, you should be able to fit it in fine. And if you're struggling to condense your intro into a couple of sentences, you can always write out a few sentences of the main points that you need to cover based on what we've talked about, and just think about how you can sort of combine those. You can even use something like ChatGPT and ask it to condense it for you. And then for the outro, you've got a thanks for listening to Podcasting Amplified, just showing gratitude to my listeners. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. So that's the call to action. You can put whatever call to action you want in there. I recommend only putting one call to action. And if you're not sure what your call to action should be, then it should probably be asking them to follow, because it's an easy thing that your listeners can do on whatever app they're listening to you on. Some choose to ask for reviews. I think that's a really hard ask, especially for new listeners. I think if they're going to leave a review, they're going to leave a review. If they're new listeners, they're probably not going to jump into leaving a review just yet. Or you might have somewhere you want to send them, your website or something. We'll be back next week with another conversation offering more insight to take your podcast to the next level and help you to achieve success. So it's kind of just reinforcing that benefit from the beginning, and also just indicating that we will be back. It's not like, the podcast isn't finished, and just when they should expect that next episode. And then I've just got a little happy podcasting at the end to keep things upbeat. So you might already have an idea of what you want to say in your intro and outro. If you're struggling, you can use a very similar outline to this. So you can say you're listening to, and then your podcast name, where we or where I, and then sort of what you do, what you talk about, so that the benefit that the listener will achieve. Even just that on its own, that first sentence should be enough. You're welcome to introduce yourself as well if you add your name in there, or you can leave that to the episode itself, which I prefer doing because it's not sort of vital information for them to listen, especially if they're new listeners who don't know who you are. And then the same for the outro. You can add a thank you. You can give them your call to action and then let them know when they can expect the next episode. By the way, if you want this launch planner, this podcast launch planner, it goes over everything you need to plan the launch for your podcast. You can get it for free over at claricast.com/launch. Now, in terms of choosing your music for your intro and outro, there are 3 points I want to make. It's important to get right. So firstly, your music that you choose needs to be royalty free. This means that you're allowed to use it without paying any royalties to whoever created the music. There are a few places you can get this kind of music from, and I'll show you in just a moment, but make sure that you personally have a look at the license agreement, the terms of use for that particular piece of music. Make sure you get it from the reputable website itself rather than just somebody who's posted it on YouTube, so that you know that you're safe. Secondly, it should be like a unique and interesting piece of music. So nothing that someone else in your niche is using, and also nothing that sounds really kind of cheesy and corporate and sort of fake. And thirdly, it has to be the right kind of mood. So you don't want it to be really busy, like this, so it's going to overpower your dialogue, your voiceover. But at the same time, you've got to get it right for your podcast. So, if it's a meditation podcast, or like a comedy podcast, or like an inspirational sort of workout podcast, they're all going to have completely different styles that works for the genre and for your audience. So try not to just pick a piece of music that you happen to like, but also think about what fits the podcast and what your ideal listener would be expecting to hear. So I've got 3 tabs open here, 3 websites where I recommend finding your music. Again, I can't guarantee the kind of copyright status of these pieces of music, so make sure that you double check. But if you don't have any budget for your music, then Pixabay is a great website. They have royalty-free photos and videos and things, but they also have music. So you can search through on pixabay.com/music for royalty-free pieces of music. And then if you look down the side here, you've got the names of each song. You can see how long they are. And also some of them have this little shield, which means that they're part of the content ID system with Google. So there is a good chance that they'll get flagged on YouTube. So if I'm using this website, I go for the ones that don't have this shield. And you can just click through and sort of have a listen to what they have to offer. I can imagine that on some kind of, travel-based podcast or something a bit more motivational. So you've got a lot of pieces of quality music there, and you can just sign up and download that. It's quite a bare bones system. You just get an MP3. You don't get the sort of chopped up stems with the drums and the instruments and things separately like you do on some of the paid websites. But again, if you don't have the budget, this is a great place to find your music. You've also got the YouTube audio library. If you have a YouTube channel and you're posting your episodes on YouTube, there's a bunch of free music. If you go into your studio and go to audio library, you can download any of these songs and just double check, again, the license details on them to make sure you don't have to attribute them to the author. But there's a lot of music in here, and I like to use YouTube audio library music exclusively on my YouTube episodes just to be safe. Another great website is Premium Beat. It's a Shutterstock company. Now this is paid music, but there's a lot of really high quality music on here, and they have a really simple way of licensing. So if you find a song you like, it's a single price per track. There are subscription options, but I prefer websites that let me just pay once and then I know that I'm safe to use it without having to pay monthly. And this website also offers you stems, so you can chop things up and make it your own. So we've got our music, we've got our script written. Now it's time to get the thing recorded. It's really important to get a high quality recording, especially for your intro and outro, because this is what your listeners are going to be hearing every single episode, and you're going to have to listen to it an awful lot as well. So you really want that high quality recording. And I'm going to go over the basics of how to get a quality recording. And again, I'm going to split this into 3 points. So the first point, and the most important one, is that you're using a quality microphone. Even in the worst recording situations, if you're not in a recording studio, you're recording in your dining room or your kitchen or something like that, you can still get a pretty good recording if you have the right microphone. And the key word here is dynamic. So we're going to look for a dynamic microphone rather than a condenser microphone. So examples of dynamic microphones are the Audio-Technica ATR 2100X. It's a USB microphone, only around $180 or so. And the Shure MV7 is another great example. And what these dynamic microphones do is they aren't particularly sensitive. You have to speak into them quite closely, but they'll help get that warm, intimate recording without picking up a load of the room sound and echo and things. Whereas a condenser microphone like a Blue Yeti, or a lot of the cheap ones that you might find on Amazon when you search podcasting mic, they're easy to use because you can just kind of sit them anywhere and they'll pick up whatever, but they're really sensitive. And again, they will pick up whatever. They'll pick up the echo, they'll pick up your neighbors next door, the cars going past outside. And they're not necessarily cheaper. It's just about choosing the right thing for the situation. And I'll leave links in the description to a couple of the microphones that I mentioned that I do recommend. Having said that, if you don't have the money to buy a new microphone at all, and all you have is your phone or your webcam or a built-in microphone, or one that you've already got, then don't worry. I'm not saying you shouldn't start without the right gear. You can still get started. You can always re-record later when your podcast has grown. The second point I want to make is the room. So as I said, if you're using the right microphone, the room that you're in shouldn't affect it as much, but it does still have some effect. So make sure that you're in a quiet room when you're recording this, that there's no, washing machine going on in the background, air conditioning, ideally when no one else is around. And if you can record in a room that has a lot of soft furnishings, so even if it's not going to be the room that you record most of your episodes in, if you can record in your bedroom or, rooms with big thick curtains, smaller rooms ideally, then it will help reduce that reverb or echo as well. And thirdly, make sure you're sitting comfortably, you've had a drink of water, you've got everything set up how you want it. And don't worry if you have to take a few takes. You don't want to spend forever on this getting the perfect take. But I rarely find that the first take's the best. It normally takes 2 or 3 to sort of get in the zone. Alternatively, you could go online and hire a professional voiceover artist to record this for you. But if you are going to be recording it yourself, I'm going to show you how to do that now on the computer. So here we are in Reaper. It's an audio editing software or digital audio workstation. You can use any software that you like to do this. You can use GarageBand if you're on Mac. You can use Audacity if you're on any system. This is a free piece of software. I'll leave links in the description to a couple of options if you don't already have an editing software that you like. But what you're going to learn now, how to record and put them together, you can apply to any software. We are going to take a quick look at how to do it in Audacity as well, though. So once you've got your microphone set up and it's all set up as per the manufacturer's instructions, you can open your digital audio workstation And in Reaper, we're just going to right click on the left there and click Insert Track. And then when we click record, you can start to hear my voice coming back. So we're just going to mute that. In Audacity, you don't have to set up a track. You can literally just click record up there and it will start recording your voice. Just make sure that in audio setup, you've got your recording device set to whatever your microphone is. So it might just say the name of the microphone, or it will say Windows input. And then it's just a case of clicking record and recording your intro and outro. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to help you to leverage the power of podcasting. If you're a podcaster looking to learn from the journeys of other passionate podcasters, you're in the right place. So we've recorded our intro there, and it'll be the same process for recording your outro. If the waveform, this little squiggly line, is really big and it's pushing up at the top, you need to turn your microphone input down. It doesn't matter so much if it's quite small like this one, because you can always turn it up after. But if it's clipping, i.e. hitting the top when you're recording, it's going to create nasty digital distortion. Just make sure that your metering is hovering somewhere around the middle when you're talking normally. And then I've also recorded it in Audacity there as well, just to show you. And you can click your cursor and just hit play to listen back to make sure it all sounds good. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified. And if you're not happy, you're welcome to just delete that track and then give it another couple of goes. But make sure you don't spend forever. It doesn't need to be the absolute perfect take in the world. It just needs to sound good. Now that you've got your voiceover recorded, it's time to edit and produce this with the music. And there are 3 steps to this. Firstly, there's the edit, where we're going to be chopping this up, removing sort of breaths and just making it nice and snappy and getting the levels up. Then secondly, it's mixing, where we're going to balance the levels, make sure it's loud enough to be listened to over the music, and apply a few effects to make it sound a bit richer and more balanced throughout. And then thirdly, it's mastering, where we're going to be turning our intro and outro into separate audio files that you can just drag into each of your episodes. So firstly, let's just bring in the music that we're going to use. So I'm just going to drag this directly in, and we're going to turn that down to start with, because it's going to be really loud compared with our track. So you can turn it down on the track there or on the piece of music itself. Now let's have a listen to both of these together. Just going to unmute that and press play. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to help you to leverage the power of podcasting. Okay, so it works. It's obviously a bit too quiet, and we could do with positioning it a bit better. So firstly, we're going to edit this thing and make it sound really great. So on Reaper, you need to turn off snapping, and then at the end of your clips, you can just drag that up to where you've recorded. It's going to help get rid of those breaths and any mouth clicks and things. And we can just bring that together so we don't have that big gap. If we click the S to solo this, I reckon that's a breath there, and I'm going to remove that. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to help. Pressing S to cut and delete to get rid of it. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to help you to leverage the power of podcasting, to amplify your message, and to achieve your goals. If you're a podcaster looking to learn from the journeys of other passionate podcasters, you're in the right place. So that's sounding good. What we're going to do now is mix it. So we're going to make it sound a little bit better and make sure it's balanced with the music there. So first, what I want to do is click Effects there and find an EQ plugin. If you're using Reaper, then it will show up a little bit differently, because I've got a lot of extra plugins here, but we can just use the built-in Reaper EQ. And what the EQ does is it's sort of like a very clever volume knob, where you can turn up different parts of the frequency spectrum. So you can turn up and down the bass, the treble, or the mids. And the reason to do this is just to make it sound better, basically. It's going to sound more rich. We're going to get rid of unwanted frequencies. So if we click play, I'm just going to click that loop repeat button, so I don't have to keep pressing play. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to help you to leverage the power of podcasting, to amplify your message, and to achieve your goals. Is that a high? If you're a podcaster looking to learn from the journeys of other passionate podcasts, and what this does is cut off some of the very low bass, the sub bass that doesn't need to be in there. It's just kind of rumbly. And then if we just bring the bandwidth up, because it's giving us a big bass boost as well. And let's have a listen now. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to help you to leverage the power of podcast. Now I want to increase the bass slightly, so not the sub bass, but just above that, around 1 to 200 hertz. And narrow this. And then click play. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to help you to leverage the power of podcasting to amplify your message and to achieve your goals. If you're a podcaster looking to learn from just a little bit of a boost there. And then secondly, we're also going to remove some of the low mids. The low mids sound kind of boxy a lot of the time, especially for vocals on their own. And this is where a lot of the room reverb lies as well. So if I click play and bring this down, you'll hear the difference. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to help you to leverage the power of podcasting to amplify your message and to achieve your goals. If you're a podcaster looking to learn from the journeys of other passionate podcasters, you're in the right place. Let's hear before and after. Leverage the power of podcasting to amplify your message and to achieve your goals. If you're a podcaster looking to learn from the journeys of other passionate podcasters, you're in the right place. So it just gives it a little bit more of that kind of broadcast quality. The second plugin we're going to use is a compressor. So if we search comp and find Recomp, just the built-in Reaper one. What this does is reduce the level of the louder words while keeping the quieter words the same. So it kind of balances out the volume over the track. So particularly words like this one. For you to leverage the power of leverage, we're going to reduce the level of that automatically with a compressor so that it's more balanced. And to set this, we just want to bring this threshold down where it's only the louder words that are going over the threshold. They're the words that are going to be affected. Our mission is to help you to leverage the power. Right, so if we bring it down further, and once it starts reducing the level of those louder words, you're going to see on this red bar here, some gain reduction. You'll see it kind of drop down when I say leverage. Where our mission is to help you to leverage the power of podcasting. You see there, so it says minus 4.3. Is to help you to leverage the power of podcasting. Minus 4.9. So that's reducing a significant amount of level there. And we can leave all of these as default for now. We don't need to go too into detail with this. If you want more information, there are links in the description to videos where I go more into depth on EQ and compression. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to help you. But for now, that's sounding fine. And then we're just going to bring that music back in and make sure that I think it probably still needs to go down a little bit. Casting to amplify your message and to achieve your goals. Yeah, I think that's about where it needs to be. Looking to learn from the journeys of other passionate podcasters, you're in the right place. You're listening. But then what we can also do with the music is, well, firstly, position it exactly where you want the vocal to come in. You're listening to Podcasting. Yeah, so I've listened to a lot of podcast intros, and I find that some of them, they'll have this big long piece of music, like the intro to the actual song, and they'll leave it until the intro to the song has finished before they start talking, and then you end up with like a minute long podcast intro because your listener's just sitting there listening to music thinking, why am I here? So if your music does have a big build up, you can just cut that off and start it somewhere else. So for example, we could start it there. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to get right into it. But in this instance, I don't think the intro is too long. But what we're going to do, we're going to bring up the level of the music when I'm not speaking. It will help sort of mix it together nicely and keep the same kind of volume throughout. And it just, when you dip the volume, it just makes way for that vocal to come in. So around where the vocal comes in, I'm going to make a cut with S. I'm just going to drag that across so it's kind of fading. You see the cross there, crossfade. So it's not a sudden drop. And then we can bring the volume up by about 3 dB or so. And if you have a listen now, you're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission can probably get away with another couple. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified. So it's not overly noticeable. It just makes it a nice balance and helps make way for the vocal. Podcasters, you're in the right place. You're listening to... You're in the right place. And then what we could do there was we could just cut the rest of it off and fade it out by dragging, if you hover over the top right and just drag that across, just fade it out as the main episode comes in the right place. You can make things more interesting by chopping things up and using the stems if you've got them, bringing instruments out and bringing them in. It depends how sort of deep you want to go into this. For this video, we're just covering the basics. Let's move over to Audacity to finish things off with the outro. Again, it doesn't matter which software you use, it's the same principle, but if you're using Audacity, then I want to show you specifically how to do it on there. So we've recorded the outro on here. Let's have a quick listen. Thanks for listening to Podcasting Amplified. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We'll be back next week with another conversation. And what we can do, we can highlight the pieces that we don't want and then press Ctrl-I to split that and delete. Probably want to move that one a little bit over, reduce that gap there, and then just highlight and chop the end off as well. And then for the outro, rather than using the same part of the music, I'm going to find a different point just to keep it interesting. It'd be nice if we had a kind of fade, like a natural end to a part of a song that we can use. Yeah, we could sort of use this part for the dialogue and then fade it out here. So let's delete that and see if that fits in. And then we can fade that in. So the episode will be finishing here and we can start to fade in the music. For fading in on Audacity, we can use the envelope tool here. So press F2 or click on this and then click where your dialogue comes in and then click again at the beginning and we can draw in a fade there and then draw in a fade at the end as well. For listening to Podcasting Amplified. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We'll be back next week with another conversation offering more insights to take your podcast to the next level and help you to achieve success. Happy podcasting. And then we got a nice kind of fade out. And then we're going to do the same thing with the EQ and the compression that we did for the intro. So if you go to Effect, then Audacity, and go to Filter Curve EQ, I'll just flatten that to reset it. And you can draw in your EQ curve. So we can click down here around 60 Hertz, back into the middle, and then we'll drop down that sub bass, those sub bass frequencies, and then add some more points and give it a little bit of a bass boost like we did on the intro. And then a reduction around 200-300 Hertz of the kind of low mids, be a little bit higher. And you can preview, you can click apply and have a listen. Thanks for listening to Podcasting Amplified. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe. And it's just giving it a little bit more of that warmth. And then for your compression, again, you can go to Effect, Audacity, and Compressor. And if we just click apply with the default settings, okay, nothing's changed on the waveform, which means that the threshold is too high and it's not catching those loud words. So if we go back on there and reduce that threshold, let's say minus 24 dB, apply. If you keep an eye on these peaks, yeah, so you can see that it's smoothed it out. And if we listen now, on your favorite podcast platform. We'll be back next week with another conversation offering more insights to take your podcast to the next level. And I'll just reduce the level of that a little bit. Now let's have a listen with the music. Thanks for listening to Podcasting Amplified. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. We'll be back next week with another conversation offering more insights to take your podcast to the next level and help you to achieve success. Happy podcasting. And as I mentioned, the last step to this is we're going to turn this into a WAV file or an MP3 file so that you can add it into all your episodes. So in Reaper, we're just going to highlight the whole piece of audio with the dialogue and the music. right to the start. We're going to add a couple of seconds of silence in the end, which is good practice, so it doesn't get cut off, and just to give a little gap between whatever the listener's listening to next. So now we can export this as a WAV file. If we click render in the file menu and give it a name, podcast intro, we want to select the custom time range that we've selected. The time selection there, 20 seconds long. That's perfect. And then we're going to leave this as a WAV file. You can pick MP3 and other compressed lower quality files, but we want a full quality because it's going to be compressed again in your when you export your podcast episodes, and we don't want to be compressing it twice. And then just click render. And there we go. And then one other thing, don't worry too much about this if this is getting too technical, but the loudness should be around -16 LUFS integrated if you want it to sound great next to other podcasts on Spotify and iTunes. If you have a software that shows you the loudness, like Reaper does here, or another piece of software like Adobe Audition, if this is below -16 LUFS integrated, you might want to increase the level of your music and dialogue until it gets to -16. If it's above, then you might want to reduce it. But there we go. If we click Media Explorer, and we can just listen back to that. You're listening to Podcasting Amplified, where our mission is to help you to leverage the power of podcasting, to amplify your message and to achieve nice. And then you do exactly the same thing with your outro. Speaking of which, if we just head over to Audacity quickly, just to show you how to export your intro and outro in Audacity, you'd be going to File, Export Audio, and naming your file, podcast, outro, and then just clicking export. So there we have it, our beautifully crafted intro and outro that's going to capture your listeners' attention and get them to take that next step. So each of your episodes is going to have this intro and outro on. It doesn't have to be the only thing that you have in your intro. You could also, before that main intro kicks in, you could have an episode specific intro where for 10 seconds or so you're just briefly introducing the key points of the episode. Or some podcasters like to cut out a little clip from the episode itself as a cold open and put that at the beginning of the episode. I find this is quite tricky to do, to find the right clip that works out of context. But if you want to go this route, then if you do it right, it can help to draw the listener into the episode. So I hope this helped. Let me know in the comment section below, what's your podcast all about? And if you want more podcasting tips and tutorials, then hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.